Senator Mitt Romney, Republican of Utah, joined CNN's State of the Union Sunday for his congressional exit interview, noting that he thinks his political legacy will be a footnote in the history books. Romney, 77, was asked by host Jake Tapper about how he wants to be remembered for his time serving the country. I don't think history will remember Mitt Romney, he replied, adding, "It's a footnote for somebody who's reading ancient history." Romney, a father to five and grandfather to 25, said what he wants is for his family to remember his legacy. "I want my family to remember me as someone who stood up for the things I believe, was not embarrassed by my fundamental beliefs, who loved the country and did what I believe was right to help preserve the greatest nation on earth," he said. Romney, who has served in the Senate since 2019, announced last year that he will retire from the Senate, opening the door for a new generation to serve. The Utah senator previously served as governor of Massachusetts and notably ran against former President Obama in 2012. Earlier this month, Romney delivered his farewell speech on the Senate floor. He called for lawmakers on both sides of the aisle to work toward unity in a time of heightened partisanship. Looking forward, Romney said he believes Americans need to allow President-elect Trump the chance to do what he said he would do on the campaign trail. I disagree with him on some things, but it's like, okay, give him a chance to do what he says he's going to do and see how it works out, he said. Still, Romney said he hopes the president-elect spends his next term focused on the future. He noted that the American people spoke through their votes over the last decade. "I lost, he won," Romney said. It is interesting to see a politician just be very candid about, yeah, people probably won't remember me. Because when I think about just the different interviews I've seen of people just talking about themselves, I don't think it's very common for them to just come out and be like, okay, I think people will most recall this, they will not remember that, etc. Um, will he be a footnote in history? It's possible, right? I'm not. I don't have some window into the future, but it's kind of a trend sometimes where a person can run for president or have come close to running for president and still be remembered. Like, there's been a resurgence over the last 6 years of content of mainly books about Hubert Humphrey, because he is getting recognized as someone who pushed the U.S. in a more progressive direction, even if he didn't win the White House. Um, People still talk about Goldwater here and there. It's just one of those things where it is harder for a person who did not become president to be remembered, but it's not impossible. Like, I think McCain is still getting mentioned here and there. Uh, that's a more recent one, so maybe as the decades pass, people will talk about him less. But it's one of those things where it's not really. I don't know. I find it interesting because Romney will be important for more so, like, if he was just governor of Massachusetts, nobody cares. But the 2012 race was what a lot of Republicans thought was a winnable presidential election, right, against Obama, who had, kind of like soured a lot of left wing people with some of the choices he made. And in losing that election, he paved the pathway for Trump to come along 4 years later and galvanize on those disenfranchised voters. Um, if in terms of like actual things he did while in office, in any of his offices, the most important thing is probably going to be, and this is unfortunate, but it will probably be him voting to impeach Trump, because that is, as far as I can tell, the first time a senator has voted for the impeachment of a president from their own party. Uh, of course, I've seen some people complain about what his motives were. Yeah, whatever. It is what it is. But I'm just saying those are probably the things that, in isolation, he'll be remembered for the most, along with being the son of George Romney, who was also a fairly significant politician back in the '60s. So it's those are the things that will most likely cause people to recall his name, because he has. I don't think the staying power of some of these other nominees, like, people will talk, whether I like her or not, and I do not. People will talk about Hillary, breaking the glass ceiling. People, I think, will mention McCain for having the first woman as his VP. Or rather, the second time, only the second time in U.S. history where a woman was the running mate in the presidential ticket, major party presidential ticket. But a lot of these other people, I don't think are going to get referenced. But again, it's still very early, and we don't know entirely what the deal is. Where he says, "I want my family to remember me as someone who stood up for the things I believe, was not embarrassed by my fundamental beliefs." I don't. That's where we get into a lot of the issues I have, because the problem with a lot of modern day politicians is they don't really stand for anything. They don't actually have a specific position or series of issues that they're known for. If you go back and watch Romney's race against Ted Kennedy back in 1994, one of the things Kennedy criticized him for was his shifting of positions, where he was just saying any old crap to try and win that Senate seat against him. So he can say he stands up for things, but he's known as a flip-flopper. He switches on issues and changes depending on what race he's running in and who he's running against. It's, that's the part where I start to have my actual disagreements with his position. And I know you can hear this damn ice cream truck outside. So when he brings up disagreeing with Trump on things and giving him a chance to do what he says he's going to do and see how it works out, that's again where we get to the same couple of problems, because, Trump this is his second term. This is not someone who we've never seen govern before. This is not someone where it's just words. I remember back in 2016 when Romney gave his speech attacking Trump, predicting that if he was the nominee, the Republicans would lose the election. And at least back then, there was the idea of him being this unknown quantity, and he's not really a conservative, and he might put liberal justices on the court. These were all things that were said about Trump back then. But now I feel that any critiques that are put towards him as someone who has been president before are legitimate. Because this isn't the unknown factor is over. That's finished. We have a record that a lot of people, myself included, don't like. And we're just gonna have to put up with it for the next 4 years and hope that someone who's not as crappy can win the White House in 2028. But yeah, I just don't agree with this whole notion of let's wait to see what he does. No, we've already seen it, and we're already rejecting it. The voters. I don't know what the deal with that last cycle was. I'm still just dumbfounded by the results. But yeah, this was an interesting interview, because it's very rare to see politicians talk about if they think they'll be remembered. Most of them are not, because most of them don't stand for anything, not do anything unique. Just running to run and get elected and deliver some half-baked speeches and policies that are more of the same old crap. Romney is not a trailblazer in really any sense of the word. He really couldn't even be like, again, McCain, right? Or Bob Dole, or, you go back even further with the older Bush, where even if you didn't like their political stances or positions, you could still respect like their service in the military. So he's kind of just there, but I think he will get talked about, at least for that Senate vote, and like the whole relationship, because his antagonism towards Trump, along with McCain's, really shows the shifting of the GOP from this party that at least tried to pretend it had some values and some class and some respectable attributes, to a Frankenstein monster that just, it's a cult now. It is, if you're not for Trump, we want you out. Just ask, Liz Cheney over there in Wyoming. So he is someone who I think people will bring up every now and again, just probably not as much as they would have if he had been able to successfully get into the White House. But even a lot of presidents are like not talked about, and we've been over this before. Like, out of all the Republicans I've seen, when they just give their speeches and they invoke, they always talk about Reagan over and over again. But even with like a living person like Bush, 43, almost never gets mentioned. You see the same thing with pretty much all the other Republican presidents. Like I don't listen to every single speech that these different senators and governors give, but I can't remember the last time one of them brought up Nixon or Ford, or and they brought up Bush 41 after he passed, but before that, barely. Hell, it's interesting just thinking about how like so many people just never get talked about, even by those who you would think would be invoking them left and right. But it's all just so wild.